Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As Jeff indicated, I'm Jack Roberts. I'm the Executive Editor for Commercial Carrier Journal. I have the distinct honor and privilege of telling you about Mr. Jerry Thrift up here tonight. And as always, it is so nice to see so many friends out there in the audience tonight. This is the first time CCJ has ever given this award where the recipient was not here to receive it. And before I get into the story of this man's life and the incredible contributions he made to our industry, just briefly tell you a little bit about how that came to be. When the fall meeting rolls around, we generally have a good idea of who we want to be talking about in terms of the next career leadership winner. And what we do is we call in some of the past winners, and for lack of a better word, we basically have a party, pizza, beer. And we were in Pittsburgh this year. We sat down at the table and we started throwing some names out. And Peggy Fisher, who was here, said, "Wait a minute." She said, "What about Jerry Thrift?" And it was remarkable because a hush fell over the table. And everybody just sort of looked at each other with a stunned expression on their face. And as the person who has to write the story, I'm sitting there thinking, we've never had a Posthumous Award winner before. That's a whole different ball of wax for the guy who has to write the story. But it was remarkable in that as soon as Peggy threw that name out there was no more discussion. That was it. And as I began to do my research and learn more about Jerry, I realized that it was really no brainer. He was eventually going to be on the cover of our magazine. There is no question of that. And it was obviously the right thing to do. I reached out to Mark Clark, last year's winner, and he gave me some really sage advice. Mark is always good to bounce ideas off of. And he said, I absolutely believe it's a fitting tribute. He said, the challenge to you is, you don't want to be in a room in Nashville and have an hour-long eulogy. And I said, no, we really want this to be a celebration of the man's life, his accomplishments. He has family, he has friends here this evening. And that's really what we're trying to do tonight, and I think we've absolutely done that. I should add that just this evening, walking through the room as people have found out who the recipient was, I've been pulled aside countless times and complimented on this selection. Really, as I just indicated, I had very little to do with it. I just had the good fortune to recognize a really good idea when I heard it. So I made a note here that I'd like to read as we get started tonight talking about Jerry. And I think that it's obvious, it's clear in this room. The legacy he left behind, his co-workers are here tonight. Rider System made an incredible effort to help me. It was really remarkable. Usually as a journalist, when I'm researching stories, I'm calling people. Some of you in this room, over and over again, trying to get you to please help me with the story. Of course, we have the malfunction. There we go. This was remarkable. Once word got out at Rider, in particular, that Jerry was the recipient of this award, I had people calling me in the middle of the day saying, I want to tell you about Jerry. So the family was extremely gracious, made my job so much easier. So let's talk a little bit about Jerry. Let me tell you this story. And many of you knew the man very well, so none of this is going to be a surprise, but why don't we get to the meat of the ceremony, as they say. Yeah, the baby pictures are always the most popular. Well, the baby pictures and the teenage pictures. Jerry was the oldest son. He was born into a working-class family in Savannah, Georgia. His father, Foster, was a boilermaker at the local paper mill. All of us Southerners out there know how ubiquitous paper mills used to be in the South. Those were tough jobs. Everybody knew that. His mother, Reba, was a homemaker until Jerry and his brother, Ricky, who is here tonight, got settled in school, and she entered the workforce. Today we would call her an administrative assistant. Back then I believe she was called a secretary. Ricky told me if anything, the Thrift household was one of self-reliance and an all-American work ethic. Our father could make stuff with his bare hands, Ricky recalls today. He had torches, wrenches, tools. He was very talented, and he told me in detail about the one time his father decided he needed a trailer for his fishing boat. Gathered up some scrap iron, pulled his tools out, made the boat, the trailer from scratch. And Ricky told me Jerry definitely inherited his mechanical interests and abilities. The Thrift boys were expected to pitch in around the household. Jobs around the house were common chores. They were expected to have jobs as soon as they were growing up. Jerry held a variety of jobs. I thought the most notable one, at least in terms of this audience tonight, was his lawn cutting service. And many of us, me included, cut grass when we were kids, earned a little money. But Jerry had a riding lawnmower. He wasn't satisfied with it. He tinkered with it in the garage, hopped up the engine, and eventually his brother remembers him drag racing his riding lawnmower with a friend's riding lawnmower out in the street in front of the house. But Ricky told me something that was really illuminating about his older brother. He said, even as a child, Jerry had a passion and a work ethic that was unusual, particularly for a young boy. We'd come home from school, Ricky remembers, me and pretty much every other kid in the neighborhood would ditch the books, run outside to play. He said, but not Jerry. He'd go in the house, he'd sit down at his desk, he'd open his books, and he'd work on his homework right away. And he wouldn't come outside and join us until it was done. And if he didn't get it done before dark, he just did not come outside and play with it. As Jerry matured, so did his interest in mechanical systems. This passion for tinkering would, in a few years' time, come to fruition as a neighbor had, and I love old cars, some of you know, an iconic 1967 Camaro Super Sport. Jerry hounded the man, sell me your car, sell me your car, sell me your car. And eventually the guy relented, and it wasn't long before the iconic 396 cubic inch Chevrolet engine was scattered across the Thrift's garage. Jerry tore it down, put a hotter cam in the car, boosted the horsepower output. The efforts were dubiously validated when the Georgia Highway Patrol clocked the Camaro at 120 miles per hour one night. They took off in high-speed pursuit. These are Georgia boys, so the Dukes of Hazzard is not that far-fetched. The Duke boys, though, always seem to be able to outrun the radio. And in real life, you can't outrun the radio. So Smokey had a roadblock set up. Jerry came hammering up in the Camaro, hit the brakes, spun the Camaro out, and it stalled. And all this work, he hadn't bothered to put a new starter on the car. And so the cops pretty much came over. I'm sure the conversation that followed was very interesting. I think you guys would be glad to know that that Camaro is still in the family. Ricky owns it today. It's been restored. It's sitting in his garage, and even as we speak, that car is not for sale. As so often happens with cars, the Camaro played another important part in Jerry's life. One night he was cruising in the Camaro, and if you have a Camaro, why would you want to go cruising in it? Spotted a young lady on the side of the road. This was Jerry's future wife, Pat. As luck would have it, Jerry's passenger, Pat was the aunt of Jerry's passenger. I did that right. That conversation ensued, and it wasn't long before the two were a couple. Now, Jerry was entering adulthood. He was finishing up high school, and like so many of us young men, he had no idea what he wanted to do. He was being pulled in many different directions. He'd gone to college. Now, he'd left Savannah, and he was in Atlanta, Georgia, but his hometown was Savannah. He had a new girlfriend at home, and as a lot of young men want to do, he tried to lead two lives at once, which led to a lot of running around back and forth between the two towns, and let's be honest, he probably wasn't giving either town the attention it deserved. His parents put up with that for a little while, and then in Pat's words, they finally had enough and put their foot down. Jerry's father knew the importance of a good education. He got a stern talking to by his father. Jerry got on the right track. He asked Pat to marry him. They were married in 1974. Bringing her to Atlanta helped him focus his attention on his studies. Both Pat and Jerry worked while he went to school full-time, making real progress towards earning his degree in mechanical engineering. Drugs had not been a part of Jerry's formative years. That's a little unusual. Usually when we're talking with the CLA, about the CLA people up here, there's usually their father and uncle was in trucking. That was not the case in Jerry's case. But when he was at Georgia Tech, he began to pay attention to trucks, and primarily this was because of a recruiting drive that Yellow Freight made at Georgia Tech. They sat down and taught the young engineer, or aspiring young engineer, I should say. And he was impressed. Pat told me, he said it would be a really neat company to work for, he told her, because the equipment they used was so fascinating. He followed up on it. Yellow Freight was interested as well. And when Jerry graduated in April 1978, he was hired by Niall Glassbrook at Yellow Freight as an entry-level shop floor manager. He was working 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then the shift was swapped. He would work 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. He told Pat he didn't mind. He needed to learn the business. He was willing to pitch in and do whatever he had to. He had an ingrained work ethic, as we mentioned, from his parents. He had a passion for engineering that was, as we will learn, was infectious. And those features quickly put him on a path for success at Yellow. He found himself eventually at the Indianapolis facility. He worked as a shop manager. This was a promotion. This was followed by a high-profile job at the police Lancaster, Pennsylvania facility. And there, for the first time, Pat says his talents and his passion for this industry truly blossomed. Lancaster was where Yellow brought in new trucks to get them fitted and spec'd correctly for their service with the fleet. It was also where they brought in the used trucks and got them ready for resale. He was in charge of getting new trucks ready for service, getting them in condition to sell. He absolutely loved it. He would routinely work 6 days a week, but that was his own choice. The job fit his natural interests and talents perfectly, she told me. This success in his job at Pennsylvania landed him his first dream job in the industry, a stint at Yellow's research and development facility in Overland Park, Kansas. His passion, even then, Pat says, was fuel economy. And this was something virtually no one was talking about in the early to mid-1980s. But Jerry was all over fuel economy even at the time. By now, he and Pat had started a family. You see him here with his cherished daughters, Micah and Courtney, both of whom are with us tonight. His professional life was accelerating as well. One of his first major projects at the Yellow R&D Center was a groundbreaking study on the effects of truck idling. Now, keep in mind, this is in the 1980s. Thrift knew that in certain inclement weather, idling was important. You don't want fuel to gel. You have to keep drivers warm and comfortable. So he understood that at the time it was a necessary practice. It was certainly accepted. But he wondered if it was being abused. He put a study together. He presented his findings to Yellow management, which clearly showed that the fleet was wasting serious money in unnecessary idling. His superiors were duly impressed. They asked him to implement a fleet-wide, nationwide policy, no idle policy for the fleet. It resulted in dramatic savings going directly to the fleet's bottom line. Jerry was very happy at Yellow, but by the early 90s, the fleet was downsizing. And as much as he loved his dream job, there was a very real risk he would find himself back out in the field. At the same time, Pat said, Jerry had really been eyeing the rider system for quite a while. He sensed that this industry giant would be a perfect fit for his talent. Jerry was fascinated by rider, Pat told me. He told me once he'd like to work there because while Yellow's business was moving freight, Ryder's business was trucks. And that fit his interests and his passions to a T. In 1993, Chris' wish was granted when Tom Herquist hired a young engineer to replace Blaine Johnson at Ryder System R&D Center in Miami. A happy condition of accepting that position, and one that Thrift wholeheartedly endorsed, was he would be expected to take a lead role on Ryder's behalf at TMC. Mike Dennis is here tonight. He's the Director of Maintenance Operations at Ryder Systems. He's going to come up and speak to you in a few minutes. He was also gracious enough to speak to me on the phone when I was learning more about Jerry's life. We have a system at Ryder, Mike told me, is that Ryder pays your paycheck, but in actuality, you really work with the trucking industry as a whole. And he told me that was a philosophy that Jerry agreed with and epitomized. He threw himself into TMC, as everyone in this room knows. He said he became our point man at the organization. He won his Silver Spark plug. He became TMC chairman shortly before he passed. He considered that chairmanship to be one of the highlights of his career. Well, back in Miami, Jerry and Pat and family were back in the South, and it turned out that Jerry's hunch about Ryder had been correct. He was now part of an organization that shared his passion for vehicle maintenance and engineering. It was a match made in heaven. His friend Art Trahan is also here tonight. He told me, Jerry and I worked together for more than 20 years. And he was absolutely passionate about vehicle specs. If there was anything that you could bolt onto a truck, it had to get past Jerry before it was going on a Ryder truck. And he was an absolute bulldog when it came to working with OEMs, field representatives, technicians, and customers for those vehicles. But, importantly, he was also very open about his knowledge, and he loved to share what he had learned with anyone who was interested. Thrift ran many groundbreaking projects at Ryder. He authorized innumerable specifications, policy changes that remain gospel of the company to this day. I had a lot of people, I would ask people what they considered his crowning achievement at Ryder, and they would always say the same thing. They would always caution me, that's not the only great thing he did. But, however, clearly, his pinnacle came in 2010 when he conducted an SAE fuel economy test for over 20 trucks, Ryder vehicles, in every conceivable configuration and specification the company runs at the Bridgestone test track in San Angelo, Texas. That was an ambitious test, recalls Scott Perry, Vice President of Supply Management for Ryder. And before it began, someone told him it was too big, he just wasn't going to be able to do it. But he did pull it off. He spent many weeks working with the 24 vehicles to gain a thorough understanding of what kind of real-world fuel economy we could expect to get from these vehicles. It was a fantastic test, and the results remain invaluable to our company. That is a sentiment that Mike Dennis shares. The white paper that Jerry wrote following that test is now Ryder's baseline document for us to leverage when talking fuel economy with our customers, Mike told me. And Ryder would not have gotten that test without Jerry. He literally handled every aspect of that project. Every detail, no matter how small, was overseen by him from concept to completion. Sadly, the SAE fuel test would prove to be one of Jerry's last projects for Ryder. Not long after losing his beloved mother in 2012, colleagues at work began to notice that Jerry did not seem well. After a little badgering, they got him to go see a doctor, and the news was not good. They discovered a tumor growing deep between the hemispheres in his brain. The prognosis was not good, but Ryder Systems Senior Project Manager Rick Lowe's, also here this evening, told me, he said, the amazing thing about that was that Thrift continued to act with grace and courtesy to everyone around him, even in the face of this bad news. Everyone knew the situation, Lowe's told me, but Jerry accepted it with a strength and dignity that I still find incredible. He talked about the plan in place to tackle the tumor. He talked about his faith. And he talked about how this would work out. Even if ultimately it only meant he'd be given enough time to put his earthly affairs in order. It was really remarkable. It was a tough time for the family. Pat has nothing but good things to say about Ryder Systems today. She told me, I cannot say enough good things about Ryder for helping us through that time. They really stepped up. From people like Chris Marks, Mike Dennis, Rick Lowe's, John Floor, and Art Trahan, down to Gail Parker in the benefits department, they all stepped up. Those guys would show up, they would offer to help me pack and move. The company as a whole was there for us financially and morally. We talked to someone from Ryder almost every single day while Jerry was sick. It was truly remarkable. As sick as he was, Jerry wouldn't give up work. He continued to try and work on a predator corrosion project he was interested in. And eventually his colleagues at Ryder, annoyed is not the right word, but concerned. Chris Marks ordered his email account deactivated. He feared that Jerry's commitment to Ryder was interfering with his colleagues at Ryder felt was his new job, beating cancer. But, sadly, it was not to be. The tumor proved to be too aggressive to treat effectively. And in May 2013, not even a year ago, Jerry passed away. It's impossible for me to stand up here and sum up a man's life and character in just a few minutes, 15 minutes or so. And as I indicated, I had so many people reaching out to me. One of those was Deborah Galloway, a retired Ryder employee who worked with Thrift as corporate parts master manager. She gave me one of the really great quotes that I got when I was doing this. She told me, the word I used to describe Jerry is mentor. He was never condescending when he explained things to you. He loved to share his knowledge. He wasn't interested in accolades. He simply loved this industry. He didn't think about leaving a mark on it, although he did. but he was always so humble about the job that he did and the knowledge he had. Tonight, Jerry's memory and his achievements are honored by the attendance of his beloved wife and daughters, countless friends and co-workers. Please join me in giving Jerry a round of applause in recognition of his life and his accomplishments.
Well, thank you so much. And Mark, I agree with you that this shouldn't be a 2-hour eulogy about Jerry, but it should be about Jerry. And to really, before this is over, I want you to capture the true essence of what Jerry was to us. And so first I'd like to thank the entire staff and selection committee involved with the consideration selection of Jerry Thrift and receiving the CCJ Career Leadership Award. I want to recognize and thank Jerry's family that traveled for this event. We are fortunate to have Jerry's wife, Pat, his daughters, Courtney and Micah, his niece, Leanne, who I had the pleasure to meet tonight and at the funeral, and probably his best friend in the world, Richard, and his brother. You know, Pat told me what a great friend and a strong shoulder that she had in Beth. And Beth, I want to thank you for coming tonight. Thanks for letting her atmosphere. We have a lot of the Ryder family here tonight, and I want to thank you for traveling for this. We have members that specifically traveled in for this tonight. Again, my name is Mike Dennis. I'm the Group Director of Maintenance for Ryder, and I had the distinct pleasure to work with Jerry for a period that was far too brief. During the 3 years that I got to know Jerry, I don't think that I hardly scratched the surface of the person that Jerry truly was. I want to give a special thanks to Jack Roberts. If you haven't had the opportunity to read that article, it is absolutely fantastic. And Jack, you quoted Jerry, you the article you said, the quiet giant. Through your interviews, it's incredible that you caught the true essence of Jerry. So for Ryder and his friends, you know, Jerry was really much more than that to us. I mean, he was an incredibly talented and well-versed in every aspect of maintenance. I came to Ryder, I've been there just 4 years now, but the depth of his knowledge, what Jerry brought to the table was absolutely incredible. Everything he did with perfection and acute attention to detail. When Jerry was asked to do something, he didn't wade in, he jumped in the deep end of the pool. And Rick, as a swimmer, you know that. I mean, he just jumped in the deep end, everything we asked him to do. Ryder asked him to get involved with the TMC. What a surprise, he became chairman. We asked him to help us with a fuel study that Jack talked about earlier. It became the white paper for fuel economy studies that our vendors use today and our OEM. It was absolutely incredible. He didn't do anything part of the way. Jerry did it absolutely with passion and with intensity that is incredible. So, today, you've heard a little bit about Jerry and what he was, but I want to ask you to do me a favor. I want to finish painting the picture for you, so bear with me on this. Please, whether you knew Jerry or you didn't, close your eyes for a minute and let me finish painting the picture. Go ahead, close your eyes. Let me tell you what Jerry was. So think of a man tall enough that he could stand on one leg and change a light bulb in a 10-foot ceiling. Think of a man strong enough to lift a baby grand piano. This is a big guy. A man with the power and the intensity to make a grizzly bear think about his approach. A man that would strike the fear in most all of us in this room. That wasn't a fear. That was our Jerry. Jack, you coined him as the quiet giant. I think Jerry was the gentle giant. He was incredible. To think of that much passion, that much intensity, yet with Jerry, it was so easy to walk into a room and get to know Jerry and to talk with him. You know, I said earlier, Jack described him, like I said, as a quiet giant, but Jerry was the type of person that, you know, he was so passionate about what he did, but he tempered that with compassion. He was incredibly intelligent, and he would, in most cases, you would think, that's the type of person that would intimidate you and make you feel like you knew less. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Jerry was a mentor and a teacher. When you walked out of a room with Jerry, it felt like you knew more, and he helped you get there. You know, I can remember, Pat, you guys coming for Jerry's retirement, and Jerry talking to everybody about how thankful and how fortunate he was. And Robert Sanchez is our standing CEO and chairman. And he walked up to me and he said he could not imagine having the courage and the resolve that Jerry had, staring death in the face. Jerry felt bad for us because we felt bad. And he felt fortunate he had the time to say goodbye to his friends and family. Jerry's taught me quite a bit about life and about how to stand and face it. You know, Pat, Courtney, Michael, Richard, I truly believe this. I believe that Jerry's faith in God and his support of an incredibly loving family is what made Jerry the person that he was and will always be to us. Jerry gave us a very profound lesson in life. He was still teaching to the very end. I want to thank you so much for sharing with us. So I'll end this by saying once again, thank you for bestowing this distinguished award recognition for Jerry and his family. He was a dear friend, and Jerry, we're thinking that's right there.